The game of chess is truly rich in intellectual skills. Skills like memory, pattern recognition, logic, and planning. One cannot argue that in a real battle, the side with the most prepared armies win. For centuries, it has been proven that the most prepared players or player will most likely gain the upper hand in an actual chess game. Therefore, the key is to be more prepared, doing your homework and be familiar with positions that most likely to occur in an actual play. One of those positions is Carlsbad Pawn Structure. Named after Carlsbad city in Czechoslovakia, this position, actually a pawn structure, became famous in the 1920s. Later on, many grandmasters built up some plans to play around this kind of structure, as it continued to occur in many games and in many opening lines, and then became more popular later on. Carlsbad pawn structure looks like this. The pattern is that both sides have two pawn islands. Here, 1 and 2 for white. This is 1, and this is the second pawn island for black. Now, notice also that white does not have the C pawn here, and black does not have the E pawn here. Now, this missing pawns from each side is a result of pawn trades. Therefore, half-open files exist. C file for white and the E file for black. Also notice in the queen side where white has got 2 pawns here versus black's 3 pawns. Well, in some other variations or versions, it could be the other way around. Now, the question is, why is it important to study positions like this? As mentioned, they can come out in many openings, and it won't hurt getting yourself equipped, or should we say more equipped, by learning the ways to proceed from this kind of position. By doing so, we'll have the confidence in plans that we choose to make or to take during the practical game or in practical play. So what are those openings that has the potential to lead to this kind of pawn structure? Well, this can be reached through Garry Kasparov's favorite opening, Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation. It goes d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6, c takes d5, e takes d5, bishop to g5, bishop e7, e3, and c6. Now we just ended up in the same pawn structure that we have shown a while ago. Another way to reach this kind of pawn structure is through the Nimzo-Indian defense, and it goes d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop to b4, knight f3, d5, e3, castles, c takes d5, e takes d5, bishop d3, and c6. In black's point of view, Carlsbad pawn structure can also be reached through Caro-Kann with e4, c6, d4, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5. So this is the exchange variation of Caro-Kann. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop to d3, bishop g4 pinning the knight, c3 providing support on the d4 pawn, e6, and this is the same pawn structure, just on the opposite side or in the black's point of view. Another opening for black is French defense. Now this happened in one of my blitz games online in Lichess, and I was playing black here, and it went e4, e6, or French defense, d4, d5, knight to d2, d takes e4, knight takes e4, knight f6, bishop g5, bishop to e7, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, knight f3, castles, c3, c6, bishop to d3, knight d7, castle, knight b6, rook to e1, knight d5. The idea is to put the knight on f4. Knight takes, bishop check, queen takes knight, knight e5, and white is not actually worried about knight f4 because he can always retreat his bishop to f1. So I played rook d8 here so that the bishop could go to d7, a development. Knight g4 attacking the queen, queen g5, queen to f3, bishop d7, knight to e3, rook to c8, knight takes d5. I captured with the c6 pawn, or with a c pawn here so that the bishop could go to c6 later on. And we just have this Carlsbad position again. Now, the point is that there are many openings that actually could lead to this type of pawn structure. And some of those are Alekhine defense and Scandinavian defense, to name a few. Now, how do we proceed from a Carlsbad pawn structure? What strategies and plans will white or black need to make? How does one approach this position correctly? Well, let us take a look at the point of view from, both colors. First, for white, the minority attack. In this position, this came through Queen's Gambit decline exchange variation. White had this mysterious rook move, rook from A to B1. Now, the idea is to set up an opportunity for B4, A4, and a push to B5. This pawn march is also known as minority attack, wherein a minority of pawns attack a majority one with the goal of destroying its structure and create some weakness. So white plays b4 here. Black replies with a6, a4, bishop to d7, b5. A takes b5, a takes b5, c takes b5. White could play bishop to takes b5 here. And notice how this, black ended up with an isolated b pawn there. And there's also this another weakness here on d pawn here, an isolated pawn, and this is going to be a target for white for the rest of the game. Now there is another version here wherein, for example, after, for example, a4 here, after a4, for example, bishop to g4 is played, and b5 is going to continue here. A takes b5, a takes b5, for example, knight e6, bishop takes, and if we capture the pawn, black is left with no isolated pawn, but with this c6 backward pawn. Now this is another weakness. A backward pawn for black has been created. Now this weakness will be new target also for white. In fact, white could play knight to a4 later on to prevent this pawn to push on c5. He could also retreat his bishop to e2 to so that this queen could leave and she will white could not have any double pawns on the king side. In fact, after knight to a4, queen c2, piling up here with a rook on c1, the c6 pawn will become a target for white. Another way to approach or to for white to continue with the from the Carlsbad pawn structure is to strike at the center or simply break through the center by e4. Now, normally this is done by having a backup pawn support on f3 and then pushing the pawn to e4. Now white plays e4 here. Now the idea is to push the pawn to e5 to gain space and additional control at the center to provoke black to exchange the pawn here. If black captures that one, then this rook here on the f file will be opened, and also with a push on e5 later on or an exchange here, this bishop on d3 becomes more active and creates a pressure on the king side of black. Another common way to proceed is to outpost a knight on e5 square. Here, white plays knight to e5. Now, that is to centralize the knight. In some other variations, he can follow through with knight d to f3 to solidify that outpost or grip on the center. And maybe f3 here so that black cannot just, and f3 here cannot just prevent black to put his own knight on this e4 square. And there are a lot of things that could happen if this knight e5 is played. In fact, in some other positions, if bishop is not here, f4 can be played here to have this solid centralized knight on e5 for white. So, this is a flexible plan. And many times I've seen this in many grandmaster games. This is an effective way to approach this kind of pawn structure. Okay. So, how about black's point of view? Well, in a symmetrical point of view, those strategies that has been used by white can also be used by black if the position allows, and it works effectively as with white. But if you play black in this kind of position, what should be the best ways to fight and maintain a solid position? For black, first is prevent minority attack by playing a5. What does it mean? Okay. Here, white moved his rook to b1, preparing the pawn push on b4. Sometimes white plays a4 here instead of the rook b1 with the same goal in mind to push for b4. Okay, now if we observe carefully, black is somewhat behind in development, as this light square bishop here is still not developed or undeveloped. That's why many black players place knight to f8, to give a room for that bishop later on to be developed, or maneuver the knight to some squares. And there's nothing wrong with that, and this position is in fact equal. But some, even grandmasters, sometimes delay the light square bishop development or sense of contribution for black by playing a prophylactic or preventive move, a5. And that move is to not allow white's queenside expansion of b4. Then black can just play knight to f8, knight to g6, and free this light square bishop and make some developments. I've seen some games of Wesley Saw wherein he plays knight to f8, knight to e6, g6, knight to g7, and just bear with me with this imagination, bishop to f5, and black looks solid. Another way for black to defend or play against with this Carlsbad Pawn Structure is to create, or rather, what should we say, create an a5 passer or a pass pawn on the a5. Okay, black can have an endgame odd through this one. This pass pawn is going to be an insurance if or when the endgame arrives. If he's got the opportunity to push to a5, then do so past the b pawn, and is going to be an edge later on. So here, black allowed white to expand his queenside. But no pressure for black because c takes b5, a takes b5, a5 can be played here. Or, for example, if white will just exchange those minor pieces first and there's no difference. Now, black now has the pass pawn. And many experienced player plays, b6 here. And the point is, this is a logical move by many experienced player here to isolate the a5 pawn. Otherwise, if, for example, white plays something else, for example, rook to e1, and black will just play b6 himself, and this is going to be a protected pass pawn here. So let's go back. So if b6 is played, nothing to worry for black, because this a5 pass pawn is not a weakness at this point, because that is going to be protected here there by the rook, and when the opportunity or right timing happens, this pawn is going to be continually be pushed uh, forward. He only needs to preserve it, or black needs to only preserve it until the endgame and not to push it carelessly so that it does not become a weakness for the entire middle game. Another way for black is to play at the center with knight e4. This is common even in top games or grandmaster games. Now, given that there is a weakness here on e4, should we say, if we go back here to f6, there is actually a weakness there on the e4 square. Sometimes black can capitalize on that, especially if there's a pin here, just like in this position on the f6, and sometimes there's enough support on the e file. Now, after knight to e4, now white needs to react. Bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and black will have a centralized knight or pawn if white captures it. And then also take note that white cannot play knight to d4 himself here, because that is there are a lot of guards there. In fact, black could play f6 to totally prevent that. After this move, black has equalized. Now that you have the ideas of playing around Carlsbad Pawn Structure, it's time to have some quick test or test of your skills. Alright, so here you're playing black. White just played a3, and we know obviously the plan is to expand that with b4, right? And could lead to a minority attack. Now, can you guess here stockfish top moves here for black? Now, you can pause the video and try it. Alright, congratulations if you saw the moves. Alright, I say moves here with S because there are many good moves to proceed. Actually, the top engine move is knight to e4, which is in our list, right? Again, the idea of black is to centralize the knight and also play knight d to f6 soon. Another plan is to capture this g3 bishop at some point because it has a lot of controls at the center or at the dark square in the middle of the board. So the best continuation here is, by the way, white rather cannot just proceed with b4 because this knight is going to be undefended. So the best move here is to capture that knight. D takes e4, knight to d2, and knight to f6, queen c2, and queen e7. Now, this position is now equal for black, and there's no major weaknesses here. In fact, you could play bishop to f5 here, or knight to h5 at some point, and get rid of this g3, our annoying g3 bishop there. Another engine move is a5, also in our list, obviously to prevent b4. And if queen c2 is played, black could just get rid of that, get rid again of the g3 bishop, which is very strong in there. And the position is equal for both players. And lastly, here you're playing white. Black just played bishop to f5 here to develop his bishop, of course. Can you find the best continuation for white? Alright. Now, stockfish top move here is go straight with b4. Followed by a4, and that's also in our list. So after knight d7, a4. And white will just wait for the right timing to push to b5. Another way to continue for white is knight to e5, followed by queen to f3 here. And guess what? Both of these plans can be combined. Well, in all of these strategies, in approaching from the Carlsbad Pawn Structure, moving on to the next strategies that you're going to use, your positional understanding will increase. And as mentioned, you're not just limited to apply one of those plans. Depending on the position on the board, you can even combine them and become more flexible in your game. As you practice more and more, you'll see that it becomes easier for you to assess and develop your sense of intuition in certain positions. Plus, you'll have the confidence in playing even the strongest of opponents. If you learned from this video, please hit like and subscribe for more videos and updates.
Hey, check this video out to make sure that you get more important information to bring your chess to the next level.